federal government does not have the person power
and anybody in the world to promote the venerable Jeffersonian idea of nullification.
Nullify these people into oblivion.
Good morning, Liberty. It is Friday morning, May 3rd, 2019. My name is Michael Bolden, broadcasting to you live from my home office and studio for the 10th Amendment Center here in downtown Los Angeles. It's 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Maybe I already said that. So good morning to you, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be tuning in, whether it's live or in the archive. I really appreciate you spending a little time with me today, and I think we've got a really interesting show today. Maybe it's because I've often enjoyed for many years sci-fi and dystopian novels and films and TV shows and things like that, that I have a predisposition towards seeing bad things on the way. That might be the case, or maybe that whole idea helps me actually see bad things that could be on the way, that I spend so much time, one way or the other. It certainly drives me to spend a lot of time, at least on this show and in my work for the 10th Amendment Center, dealing with mass surveillance issues. Certainly the power of government surveillance today to monitor everywhere you go, to keep track of you even if your phone is off, to know your location, to monitor you by your license plate, to read and collect all the metadata and actually full context of your emails, your texts, your phone calls, your VoIP calls, whether it's Skype or Google Hangouts. All that is being scooped up. Now, whether there's somebody sitting there reading through everything that you do or not, obviously is absurd, but they're developing these algorithms that are getting better and better and better that determine who you hang out with, what your views are. I mean, it's going to be so easy for them to build up a target list. Years ago, well, not that many years ago, when Obama was in office, it sure seems like a long time ago these days, but when Obama was in office, we certainly heard a lot about the IRS targeting conservative organizations. Now, that was because they volunteered to become a nonprofit. 10th Amendment Center is proudly capitalist, free market, for-profit, and we will not partner with an organization, the IRS, that we're working to see the end of. We don't want them around. I fear the IRS, so I continue to follow what they demand of me. I pay my tribute. But I want them to be gone at some point. And whether I work to set the foundation to do that now or help make it happen today or in the future, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to do what I believe is right. But that's a situation where they were targeting these organizations based on filing, applying to the IRS for basically a discount on their stealing. It's even worse when you think about the ability to target people based on who they talk to, where they go, what they purchase, all this type of thing. I was recently reading an article, actually just this week, about how, there's situations, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I often do. I'll be talking with my partner, Sarah. We'll talk about some kind of a product or something like that. And then, sure enough, one of us, when we're scrolling through our feeds, is getting an ad for a very similar, if not the same product that we may have been talking about. And, of course, the conspiracy theory is, holy crap, they're actually listening to you and passing this along to the advertisers, which is bad enough. I mean, that's one thing. Advertisers aren't locking me up and throwing me in jail. They just want me to buy stuff, and I can say no to that. But of course, if they're doing that, they're certainly passing along this information to government at all different levels. So we often, we make these jokes like, oh, better not talk about what you're going to buy. I mean, maybe we should, and then we'll get a coupon or something like that. But I was reading this article that basically says you may think that this is happening, but it's actually probably far worse. They're not actually recording and monitoring and passing the data along. The algorithm is just getting so good that they're beginning to be able to predict the types of things you need to purchase. And I don't know what's right on that, but it certainly opens my eyes towards these types of crazy things that everyone would say years ago, not even long ago, like, that's not going to happen. That's just the stuff of future books. This is, Orwell didn't even have that kind of technology in 1984. There's no way. So, I don't know. It's a long rant about some unrelated things, but I think it all ties together. And I spent a lot of time on this show dealing with facial recognition. For example, on Monday's episode, I also talked about facial recognition. I've covered it in probably 4 or 5 different episodes, covering from police using law enforcement to Amazon pushing the information along to people, to the TSA's roadmap, to the DHS, JetBlue, all kinds of things using facial recognition. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about how Amazon is supercharging the ability of local police to be in this mass surveillance state by using surveillance technology. Now, they're also pushing it on federal agencies, primarily ICE, and I think the opposition to that is actually, the opposition to almost all of it, I think, is very misguided and actually plays into the hands of what they want to do in the long run. And when I say they, it's not just Amazon, but if we're talking about a corporatist kind of view, it's Amazon and their government buddies. Now, we all think that, Bezos is anti-Trump, and maybe that's the case, owning the Post and things like that. But he certainly is pro-massive surveillance state because his company is aggressively working to hand this off. And we got a publication of all places in the Washington Post. And I think they were able to sneak it in there because the opposition that they included in there is actually helping advance surveillance. And I'll get into that in a moment. But the Washington Post gave us a bit of an insight on how a large police department, the first one that actually took, always thought it was Orlando, but it turns out that it was Washington County Sheriff's Department up by Seattle, where they've been using this since 2017. And they gave us kind of a daily look at this and how they're using it on a regular basis. So we're seeing it play out. I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about efforts on a local level in Oakland and San Francisco. There's a really, really good coalition of pro-privacy people there. And whether you love the rest of their economic politics in the Bay Area or not, everyone, conservative, liberal, libertarian, green, socialist, I don't know. What I was going to say, fascist, all of them. Basically, everyone has something to learn from what they're doing there to actually reject the surveillance state on a local level. Because I think people recognize, and that's the whole idea behind the 10th Amendment, people recognize that you can't really rely on Washington, D.C. to limit its own power. If you're subscribed to our email newsletter, we sent out an email earlier this week. Of course, I have to mention, it's 10thamendmentcenter.com/register if you want to get on the email newsletter. We send updates a couple of times a week. We sent out a newsletter talking about how a federal court was throwing out an 11-year lawsuit against the NSA. I got to get this quote up. I apologize for not having this ready. But I want to pull this up. Mike Maharrey did a report on this, and this might be one of the best lines I've seen in a 10th Amendment Center article in a long time. Bear with me just a moment. He says, in summation, the federal government investigated the federal government and determined there was no way for the federal government to determine if the federal government did anything wrong without jeopardizing the federal government's federally protected secrets. Now, Electronic Frontier Foundation, whoever they're working with, they're going to be appealing this, but basically a federal court threw this out. The feds gave them evidence, but they said you can't use this. You gotta throw out the case because it's national security. So relying on the court system to protect us isn't working. Relying on the federal government to limit its own power, I read this morning that some people inside the Trump administration, they want to make the phone call monitoring, the phone call records, which is really kind of an outdated surveillance program. They want to make that permanent. We know that they extended FISA for about 6 years last year. So the feds aren't going to stop this. So really the solution is going to have to come more locally, whether it's from individual states or local communities. But I'll get to all this in a little bit. Maybe I'm hyping up all the things I'm going to cover more than I actually can, but I will do my best. I want to say hi to some people out in the live chat. Again, we're broadcasting live through YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and DLive. I appreciate everyone joining me wherever you are. We're also in the archives at BitChute, BitTube, and then podcast versions at iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and somewhere else. I forget. We applied for Napster. I don't think they'll ever take us. But hello over on YouTube to Justin, Ralph, Pop Basketball, Denver Libertarian. Haven't seen you in the live chat for a while. Chris Branco, always good to see you. David, Michael, I think you're in, I can't remember if you're in Germany. He always says good evening. Wally World, Idemon, good to see you, buddy. And a few others. Oh, Yellow Blue, Austrian Watchman. That's a new name. Tyler B. And on Facebook, Jay, Joyce, Eric Nance. Really good to see you, Eric. Thank you for your support. Randy Kessler, Raphael, Tom Rankin. It was really good meeting you last summer. That was really cool to run into you in New Orleans at the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus Take Human Action Bash in New Orleans. That was last summer. So I appreciate you guys all joining me. Thank you so much. Denver Libertarian says I'm back. And then, of course, hi to Dennis Marburger and John Hume. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Let's get into this a little bit more. And I want to cover just a little bit of this report from the Washington Post. It's been reposted over at the SF Gate website because I'm not giving the Post any money. I'm not logging into their account. I hate all these mainstream media publications, but sometimes you can get some interesting stuff out of it. So the title of the article, again, all the links that I'm going to cover are in the show notes. We put the show notes before the show thanks to a recommendation a while back from Idemon. I appreciate you doing that because I think it's great to have it there. It helps me do the setup as well. So we put those on YouTube in advance. So if you're watching live on YouTube, it's easy to follow along with most of the stuff I cover. But of course, if you want to look at the show notes or you're listening in the podcasts or whatever archives, you want to go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. I'm slowly but surely improving that landing page, which is dedicated just to this show. It gives you the links of where you can subscribe, and it gives you all the archives. At some point, I got to figure out, and I'm using the Divi website builder for WordPress. There are some options, some premium plugins, where I can make it sortable by category. So if you just choose facial recognition, you'll easily be able to pull up all of those. Right now, there isn't a search just based on podcasts. So we'll keep looking at it. Idemon says, Bolden, your memory is amazing. I think that's twice that we've had that conversation. Yeah, I mean, I lose my keys, honestly. I lose my keys so often that it's a real problem. So as long as I have everything in my day-to-day life in the exact same place at the exact same time, otherwise I'm going nuts. And maybe that's an early sign of Alzheimer's that runs in my family. The short-term memory transition doesn't work too well. I'm taking a lot of ginkgo as a supplement. Yeah, sometimes the weird numbers. I can remember my Wisconsin driver's license from when I lived there over 20 years ago. So it is weird. So let's get into this. Okay. Steve said, stream is looking good. I'm doing my best. Thank you, sir. So Amazon, facial recognition technology is supercharging local police. And I will always make the case, and Mike Meharry and I were talking about this yesterday. He has some time off for a couple of days because his daughter is graduating. Congratulations. I hear she has a gig with the Peace Corps. She's going to be going to Africa for a couple of years. That's pretty incredible. So congrats to Mike. I'm assuming he's not. If you're watching this, that's a real problem. So we were talking about this, and we don't see the obvious. Let me restate that. It isn't told to us that there is a direct link between this type of surveillance and the federal government. But we know through the Patriot Act and through other post 9/11 stuff that they've passed, that if you're collecting information on a local level, you're basically acting as a federal surveillance tool. So any law enforcement agent who's using a Stingray device, a license plate reader, facial recognition technology, or drone, they're almost certainly getting budget for that from Washington, D.C., or they're literally just handing the information off. It goes through something called ISE, which is the information sharing environment. This ensures that everybody is passing information along to everybody. And someone who goes through a red light camera in Boise, Idaho, the cops in Miami, Florida know about it or have access to that information. Everybody knows everything about everybody. That's what they want. Total surveillance state. Joseph Stalin would have loved this. Absolutely. So it all gets passed along either through ISE or through fusion centers. And I think the fusion centers, and I haven't looked into fusion centers a great deal lately, but I think it's around 70 to 90 of them around the country. And Neil Archer points out they can use any camera posted anywhere. So let's look a little bit into this article. They say in late 2017, Washington County Sheriff's Office became the first law enforcement agency in the country known to use Amazon's artificial. Now, mind you, this is an Amazon publication. This is coming from the Washington Post, and they're still saying the first law enforcement agency in the country known to use Amazon's artificial intelligence tool Rekognition. Man, that is crazy to me. If that doesn't strike you the same way it does to me, I don't know if I can explain that. But that tells you a lot. It transforming this thicket of forests and suburbs into a public testing ground for a new wave of experimental police surveillance techniques. They're just experimenting. That's all that they're doing. They're not building a total surveillance state, right? They're just testing it out. And as we go through this, I'm going to explain why I think this entire article is setting the stage for more of it, even in opposition. Almost overnight, they say, deputies saw their investigative powers supercharged, allowing them to scan for matches of a suspect's face across more than 300,000 mugshots taken at the county jail since 2001. Well, that's one piece. Then they go on. A grainy picture of someone's face captured by a security camera. I think Neil Archer said that. They can use any camera posted anywhere. So corporate security cameras can feed into this. I don't know if it's all patched in all the time like we see in the movies. I don't think that's far off if it's not already here. A social media account or a deputy's smartphone can quickly become a link to their identity, including their name, family, and address. More than 1,000 facial recognition searches were logged last year, said deputies who sometimes use the results to find a suspect's Facebook page or visit their home. So this is now becoming ground zero for the debate over policing by algorithm. And I like seeing the fact that there is a debate, there is a rejection in some way in the minds of the people to this, but I think there's way too much support of it. And a lot of the opposition, I think, is misplaced in creating a problem. I keep saying that. Defense attorneys, and these are the two things that we generally hear. The problem with facial recognition, we always hear, doesn't cover the real problem with facial recognition surveillance. One, it could lead to the wrongful arrest of innocent people. That is a problem, yes, but it's not the root problem. And two, accuracy is also hotly disputed. We know that the darker your skin is, the more likely the facial recognition is going to have a mismatch. At least that's what I've seen in the tests. I mean, Google's facial recognition AI, you can Google this. And Google will tell you in the search results, they were showing facial recognitions between black people and apes. I mean, the absurdity of that. If I were that person, I would be so pissed off. I mean, maybe I would laugh at it. I don't know. But if it's used by cops and it's already potentially that inaccurate, and there's certainly a disproportionate number of people of color in prison under the drug war. I mean, this becomes a crazy, crazy tool. So these are obvious problems, but those aren't the real issues that I have with it. My issue personally is that they use it. I don't trust government, period. And I won't say full stop, because if you follow Tom Woods, then again, I said it. He said, can we please stop using that? I don't trust government, period. And I especially don't trust government in modern times. I mean, anyone watching this show, listening to it, I don't think any of us really think that government can be trusted. I mean, certainly there's some back and forth about like, well, this team is better than that team or less bad or whatever. But do we really want government to have the power to know where you go, who you talk with, where you are at all times? I mean, we know the TSA, for example, is going to have It is on their roadmap, on their website specifically. They want pervasive facial recognition throughout airports, all airports. They say it's just being used for international travelers right now in the media, but it certainly is going to be advanced and expanded to everything. We know the White House was already doing a test run, and I covered this in a previous show, of facial recognition through adjacent parks. The Secret Service, the SS, has been using this. And you can't even opt out in that situation. So when they start putting it in public places and are monitoring where people are going, and there's this whole system of security cameras all over the place, it becomes really problematic. I don't have to be too imaginative to see what government can do with this kind of thing. So we know, and the report covers this as well, that police and agencies have been using this. They've been using forms of facial recognition. So the FBI runs a database called the Next Gen. They've been building this for a number of years. I did a short, 2-3 minute video on YouTube on this in 2016 or so, where I started covering it, and I didn't really know what the hell I was talking about, but I think I'm getting a little bit better at this point. I'm still learning as I go on this. But if we always understand that government costs on things are extremely expensive or inflated, we all know about the Pentagon budgets where they pay $10,000 for a hammer or a roll of toilet paper or things like that. That creates kind of a limit on how they can do this. I know they can print money at will, run on debt, but it does create some type of a limit. Now, Amazon has taken it to the next level, and they cover this in this Amazon report. I should just start calling the Washington Post Amazon. I'm doing my best to boycott Amazon personally. I've been switching a lot of my daily needs purchases elsewhere. I'm not sure if Barnes & Noble is good, but when I get books, I'm going to Barnes & Noble. When I print books for the 10th Amendment Center, so people who are members will often get a printed copy of a handbook or something like that, I'm printing those at Barnes & Noble rather than Amazon, partly because Amazon is a government partner. They might as well be the surveillance arm of the government at some point. And this is where it's going. So they say in this Amazon report that they've marked perhaps the biggest step in making the controversial face scanning technology mainstream. Their product is called Rekognition. They just changed the letter to K. It's easy to activate, requires no major technical infrastructure, and it is offered to virtually anyone at bargain barrel prices. Washington County spent about $700 to upload its first big haul of photos. And now, for all its searches, it pays about $7 a month. $7 a month. The barrier to entry to mass facial recognition is unbelievably low. And the technology is actually very good, even though there are a lot of mismatches. But that's where the problem gets to in this article. This sounds alarming, I think, to a lot of people. Whoa, I don't know about that. Maybe some people love this kind of thing, and they're like, oh, I'll finally be safe. I don't know. To me, the greatest threat to my safety is government. But they say it's impossible to tell, though, just how accurate or effective the technology has been during its first 18 months of real-world tests. So their concern is not about pervasive surveillance, not about them monitoring where everyone's going at all times, not about them mounting facial recognition on drones or on license plate cameras, which they absolutely can do. They're concerned about how accurate it is. If it was 100% accurate, I would still be opposed to it. In fact, it's probably more dangerous. I don't know. Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's always just dangerous in the hands of government. They go on and they say Amazon's guidelines for law enforcement say officials should use Rekognition's results only when the system is 99% confident in a match. But no one's required to do that. They don't have a requirement to do that, and they can change it. A couple other highlights. From a chief deputy defender in Oregon, they say people love to always say, hey, if it's catching bad people, great, who cares? And of course, I think what we're going to see in coming years is some high-profile bad guy bust. Bad girl, whatever. They're going to bust somebody and say, whoa, we're all safe, or they're going to stop a terrorist. I'm not talking about politicians this time. They're going to stop what the government calls terrorists or some violent person through facial recognition, and they're going to get some people on the margins to be okay with this, to drop their opposition. because people are so fearful. And part of the reason that we're so fearful, of course, is that the right to keep and bear arms is primarily a flyover mentality. And even, it's the middle of the country. Here on the coast, man, there's no one carrying guns around here except the really dangerous cops. Trust me, you cannot trust LAPD. They are scary people. I had even talked about on this show how at one point I was going to get a taser because at least that's easy. And there's no restrictions on carrying those. But the fear of actually a cop, because no one does this except security officers, and I am not a licensed security officer, and the fear of actually getting gunned down by a police officer in LA for trying to protect myself, even with just a taser with a laser sight on it or something like that, at this point it's still too great. So anyways, different conversation. But basically, people are so afraid of criminals because I think part of the reason is because the culture of self-defense doesn't exist in many areas and primarily in big cities. So as long as people don't have this culture of being able to take care of themselves, their family, their property, and their neighbors, and they have to rely on police, which we know the Supreme Court repeatedly has said that the police are not obligated to protect you. They're only there to actually respond after the fact and maybe catch people, whatever it may be, to enforce laws after the fact. They don't have to stop it. They're not a security team. And if you call the cops here in LA, I had an experience back when I was still dumb enough to call them. And I was living in Hollywood at the time. This is sometime in the 90s. And I had this crazy, I don't know, he must have been on meth or something. He thought I had a dog. I'm afraid of dogs. I'm not comfortable around them. Once in a while I am. But he thought I had a dog that was barking out of my apartment. It was my neighbor above me. And this dude was pounding on the door of the apartment building. Really cool old apartment building. Pounding on the door for weeks. Finally, he started buzzing everybody and say, hey, I'm locked out. Can I come in? And for whatever reason, he thought I had this dog that was driving him nuts. It was the meth that was keeping him awake, but whatever. And he came over and he's like banging on my door for like an hour trying to kick it down. And I called the cops. Of course, I'm not armed. I can't protect myself, so I have to rely on the cops to protect me. A lady down the hall actually came out and went off on him and got him out, freaked him out to the point where he left, which I guess is all it would have taken. But instead of cowering, I relied on that. And then the cops never showed up. About an hour and a half later, they called and said, hey, are you still having problems? I called them saying a guy's trying to kick down my door right now. And that's the response I got. So people have this culture of relying on police who don't show up to protect you. May be different in a really small little town of a couple hundred people. That may be a different case. But in the large cities where they're implementing these things, we're relying on cops. I try not to as much anymore. I mean, I won't call them. I'm scared of them. And when you do that, of course, people will advocate for this type of technology. Well, the cops are protecting us. This has to be okay. So that's a real problem. The deputies, according to this report, say the system is a huge hit. Chris Lee, who has used the search in 5 cases of burglary and theft, getting bad guys, said many of his colleagues have become prolific users, eager to find a simple resolution to an otherwise difficult hunt. You're always like, is it going to show us something? I'm just going through a couple of the highlights. Facial recognition technology has for decades been a police agency's dream. Yeah, we know. A simple, stealthy way to identify anyone from afar without their knowledge or consent. Now, if police were peace officers and there weren't a zillion unconstitutional laws on the books, then maybe. But you're empowering them to ramp up their ability to enforce when most of what they enforce, they shouldn't be enforcing in the first place. Hopefully that makes sense. The FBI said it ran, and this is through the Next Gen system, that it ran more than 52,000 facial recognition searches in the past fiscal year. And in 2016, researchers found that 52 state or local agencies had at some point relied on a facial search system built by federal contractors. But Amazon, we know, makes it $7 a month. $7 a month. And you or I could set up a facial recognition account, I believe. I think the New York Times or the Post or somebody set one up for themselves. So anybody can set up these systems and just start running them. This is a really interesting article. I think it shines a lot of light on it. They talk primarily, when they're talking about the opposition to it, they're talking about failures on matches. They also talk about racial disparity. These are true. But this also feeds into the thing where they're not stopping using this. We're all uploading our data to Facebook. We all get our faces scanned when we go to the DMV. They've got all these pictures, and the error rate is going to go down, and the mismatches are going to go down. So if the only opposition to it today, now, don't be surprised, in 2-3 years, Amazon News at Washington Post tells us, oh, all those problems, back when Washington County started doing this, there was a lot of opposition to it. Well, now the problems that the opposition complained about are over. No worries anymore. The accuracy is through the roof. We're not doing racial mismatches. Everything's okay. Cops are good. They're only going to use this to catch bad guys. And that's my problem with it. So I think this type of stuff should be outright banned all over the place. I don't want the TSA having it. I don't want ICE having it. I don't want DHS having it. I don't want local cops having it. I mean, it's a real problem. And then the private companies that have it, they're all feeding their information through the surveillance state. They're being required to. They're passing along all the data to the feds anyway. So the local companies or the big major companies, they're acting as surveillance tools. Well, over in Oakland, again, I mentioned Oakland and San Francisco are both working on bans. Not restrictions or get a warrant, but just ban that you can't be trusted. And I think the organization is called Oakland Privacy. A proposal, this is from this morning. Oh, yeah, I was pulling up my news articles on this, and I noticed that there was an update this morning. So just a couple hours ago, they updated this at KPIX 5, which is the Bay Area CBS affiliate. It says, a proposal to ban Oakland's use of facial recognition technology passed its first administrative hurdle late Thursday, but has a long road ahead before it becomes law. So there was actually a first legislative vote on this, and it moved forward, saying, yeah, we can do this. Brian Hofer, chair of the Oakland Privacy Commission, said the San Francisco District Attorney's Office and the Alameda County Sheriff's Office have already reported using the technology to fight crime. So they're using this. I think most people who've read about this around the country, it's becoming a big article with regards to, for example, the TSA. They think, oh, maybe just the TSA, or the problem is JetBlue. JetBlue is using it, or the problem is ICE. But they're not recognizing that it's being implemented all over the place. And if your face is being uploaded to Instagram, Instagram is passing that information along to NSA. NSA is going to share that at some point. So they are using this. Bay Area law enforcement and the district attorney's office, they're definitely using it. So here's a quote. This is what I thought was really interesting, because most national news only talks about the problem being racial or the problem being inaccuracy. And again, I cannot repeat enough that if that's the problem with it, they're going to fix that over time, and then there's no problems, and it's going to be everywhere. So if you're going to oppose this, yeah, I can recognize if that can help build a coalition, but if that's your only opposition, you will not be opposing for long. You should oppose it based on the fact that government can't be trusted with ubiquitous surveillance, whether it's behind the scenes or whether it's facial recognition or whatever. And I was surprised to actually see this quote in the news report. They actually had a video coverage of this, and this is the text of it. This is one person who said, Richard Hogan was his name, anytime they run your face through the software, I'm sure it's going to log your address, the time, and everything else. So it's kind of just keeping tabs on everybody. And I'm glad they must have had enough people say this type of thing that they had to put that in as the opposition instead of just talking about racial injustice, which, and I don't want to discount that at all. I apologize. I am not discounting that. But the bigger problem is that they're going to use this on everybody. And then, of course, they always include a supporter who says it's necessary to keep the crime rate down. So it's good that some people are thinking this. This passed the first step in Oakland, in San Francisco as well. just this last month. According to this article at VentureBeat, again, all the links are in the show notes at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. San Francisco took a step closer to becoming the first city in the country to ban facial recognition software with the passage of some amendments to the Stop Secret Surveillance Ordinance today. That's already on the books, this Stop Secret Surveillance. It really does restrict a lot of surveillance technology in San Francisco. But they found a loophole, and they could use facial recognition, and we know they're doing it. They're telling us they are. So now they've already passed this some amendments to it out of a first, I think, committee stage. So this is from Aaron Peskin. He says, quote, the propensity for, this is the person who introduced the new legislation to ban facial recognition. The propensity for facial recognition technology to endanger civil rights and civil liberties substantially outweighs its purported benefits, and the technology will exacerbate racial injustice and threaten our ability to live free of continuous government monitoring. That's from a politician, a very far left-wing politician. I'm very glad to see. It threatens our ability to live free of continuous government monitoring. So it passed the first stage, one public commenter, so they had this public debate in the committee, and people came out in opposition pretty heavily, other than the cops. The police lobby organizations are fully in support of this. One public commenter pointed to Monday's New York Times front page, which had an article about facial recognition software in China used to monitor 500,000 members of its Uyghur Muslim population over the span of a month. So China, we know, if you've heard about this, they're including this social credit score into public government surveillance. And they're putting surveillance cameras. They want to have ubiquitous facial recognition. And if you want to see how bad things can get, monitor what the type of thing that they're doing in China, and then it's just not as far along here in the U.S. yet. And Tim Kingston, an investigator with the Public Defender's Office, says we don't want that to happen here. Of course not. Current facial recognition technology is corporate, privately held, it's proprietary. This is another problem. That people just think that the problem is that it's run by Amazon. Well, it doesn't matter who's running it if the people with the guns are the ones that are using it. So that, I think, is another issue. So the only opposition that we've really found are the police. Cops, and this is one last article that I'm covering today, cops are trying to stop San Francisco from banning face recognition surveillance. This was in Gizmodo last month. And it says, while civil liberties groups, including the ACLU and EFF, are pushing the Stop Secret Surveillance Ordinance, the San Francisco Police Officers Association has been opposing the bill and pushing its own supporters to send emails to lawmakers demanding the bill be defeated. FPOA did not respond to a request for comment. Supervisor Aaron Peskin, again, the San Francisco city lawmaker who first introduced the legislation, said his office had been inundated with identical emails that originated in an email blast from the Police Officers Association. Some of the emails still had blank spaces where names and neighborhoods were supposed to be filled in. So people are just taking out this email. They've got a copy of it here. You can see it if you're watching the video, and they're just blasting it out. They're just blasting it out. Need more surveillance. All stakeholders, homeowners, we oppose this. Don't stop facial recognition. The fact that anyone would actually be on board on this, I think, reveals a much larger problem in general society. So I'm not sure who's sending it, but the fact that he's getting inundated with opposition, certainly the Police Officers Association are on board with killing this. So that's a real problem. But there are positive efforts, I think, where people, I don't know if it's something that we can actually do anything about, but certainly, like I say all the time, no matter how difficult the odds, it's imperative upon us to do what's right. And to me, this one is a little overwhelming. I don't see how it can be stopped. I know the steps that need to be taken. I just don't know if the general public is on team privacy versus I'm too busy. I don't care. I gotta go shopping this weekend. I gotta work 2 jobs. I can barely pay my rent. Things like that. I mean, of course, the Federal Reserve inflation machine certainly keeps us economically on our knees and makes it much more difficult to have the time available to do stuff. But a lot of people, we all went through government school and we were taught that government is good. So Anyways, I hope you guys found this interesting. I want to take a look over in the live chat, some interesting things going on here. Eric Nance over on Facebook, they say no warrant is needed for public info. There's no, yeah, of course. They say you don't have an expectation of privacy in public. Neil Archer says, I'm already working on a reflective makeup. That fools them. That would be awesome. I know Dan Reed always talks about, and he does the Culinary Libertarian podcast, which you should listen to. Dan Reed always talks about having tinfoil on your face. Tinfoil hat takes a whole new level. Instructor Hickman, good to see you. Facebook is also using the facial recognition program. Certainly. I was permanently banned for being a suspicious person, and Facebook requested a clear picture of my face to verify my identity. I mean, and it's not just that. They are using facial recognition on everything. You upload a picture, they generally know who to tag in it before you even put anything on there. David Michael says this is frightening. I agree. Hickman says, the best of my knowledge, they shouldn't have had my picture on record in the first place. Well, yeah, I think that's where we basically handing the information to them. Neil Archer says San Francisco just doesn't want to know who is pooping in the streets. Yeah, well, San Francisco does have a lot of problems, and it smells like pee. I do like visiting up there. I prefer the East Bay. But yeah, I mean, big cities have a lot of problems. Justin Bayola, they also demand proof of your legal name on Facebook as well. And just scrolling through, Denver Libertarian, it is good to have you back. No way anyone could be fabricated to have been present at the scene of a crime. See, there you're walking through the corner of the video. And Instructor Hickman says, I take my personal security seriously, and I do what I can to mitigate the risk of surveillance. I would love to know more ways to do this. I think a key is to not, well, my face is here on YouTube and Facebook, so I'm in the database. There's no doubt about it. But if you've got ideas that I can share with other people. I mean, the idea of covering your face in tinfoil is one thing, or makeup. I mean, this sounds like over the top. But I think at least at the time being, working to ban these things, and if Oakland Privacy is actually, if they actually get the job done, they've already passed some very strong restrictions. And it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole, but if they can do it, why can't it be replicated in Lexington, Kentucky, or New York City, or Charlottesville, or Austin, or Boise, Idaho, or Cheyenne? Why can't this type of thing be replicated there? If San Francisco beats people to the punch on this, that's, in a way, it's embarrassing, but in a way, it should be very motivating. Anyways, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope you found it educational. I hope it kind of riled you up a little bit for the week, and it really pisses me off. I'll continue doing more episodes on this as things come up. I know 2 facial recognition episodes in a week might be a bit much. Probably on Monday, I'm going to do a show, another follow-up show. I had a lot of positive feedback on my last Nullification Movement news episode, where instead of talking about one topic, I just gave updates on legislation that we're tracking, things that are moving, things that maybe get killed, whatever. So I think I'm probably going to do that unless I see something else that I need to cover right away. I still also want to talk about some healthcare socialism. Maybe I'll do a little bit more on foreign policy. I tend to actually defer and recommend people to the Ron Paul Liberty Report on that, or the Scott Horton Show. And I don't know if I have anything new or interesting to add, but from time to time, I'll mention some foreign policy things because it's so important. Anyways, I really appreciate you guys all spending some time with me. I'm very grateful for it. If you support this show, there are 3 very easy and very free things that you can do to help out. All the platforms you watch or listen on are easily triggered. And so if you smash the like button, leave a comment, or share a link to it, it will absolutely tell more people to watch or listen to the show. And the 4th one, I guess, iTunes. iTunes reviews are awesome. I don't want to be begging for this, but I guess I got to mention it. That's just kind of the industry standard. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for everybody who does all these things. And as you've seen throughout the episode, I'm actually including, I'll click back over here to the video. I'm including this link so I don't have to mention it over and over again. If you support our work, please become a member. I see a lot of people out there who are, and I'm very grateful for that. Even if you don't ever donate a dime, that's okay too, but if you do feel compelled to support us, it's as little as $2 a month. We make it go a long way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I'm very grateful for you spending some time with me today. I hope you have an awesome weekend. I'll see you next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And for more episodes of Good Morning Liberty, have an awesome weekend. Thank you so much.